The rain had been falling since late afternoon, turning the streets of Portland into long mirrors of light, and Ethan Walker stood alone in his apartment, feeling the quiet press against his chest as if the walls were slowly moving closer, his phone face down on the table, unanswered messages piling up from coworkers he barely knew, the kind of life he had built after learning how to survive without expecting too much from anyone. And just as he reached to close the curtains and end the day, a knock came, soft but certain, cutting through the sound of rain and traffic, and in that instant something tightened inside him, a feeling he had not allowed himself to name for years, because some feelings, once named, refused to stay quiet. He opened the door without thinking, and there she was, Claire Morgan, standing under the dim hallway light with rain on her coat and uncertainty in her eyes, looking older but familiar in a way that made time collapse, and Ethan froze, staring in disbelief. At that moment, as memories rushed him all at once, memories of late-night talks, shared coffee cups, laughter that once felt endless, and a goodbye that never truly happened, his mouth opening but no sound coming out, because nothing he had prepared himself for in life included this, not after 3 years of silence, not after convincing himself that the chapter was closed. Claire spoke his name softly, as if afraid it might break, apologizing for coming without warning, saying she didn't know where else to go, and the words landed heavy, because Ethan remembered a time when he had been the place she always went, and now he was just a door she hesitated to knock on, yet he stepped aside, letting her in, because some instincts live deeper than reason, and as she crossed the threshold, the apartment seemed smaller, filled with the past breathing between them, the smell of rain and the echo of what once was. They stood there awkwardly, not touching, not moving, and Claire looked around, as if trying to place herself in a life she no longer belonged to, noticing the changes, the simpler furniture, the quiet order, the signs of a man who had learned to live carefully, and Ethan watched her hands, still shaking slightly, wondering if she was nervous or cold, wondering if she had practiced this moment as much as he had imagined it in his loneliest nights. He offered her a towel, a glass of water, anything to keep his voice steady, and she accepted with a small smile that held both gratitude and regret, and they sat down, not too close, leaving a space between them that felt louder than words, the kind of space built by time and unanswered questions. And though neither spoke right away, the silence was not empty, it was crowded with everything they had never said. Ethan noticed the way Claire's eyes moved, careful but curious, and he realized she was seeing him differently, not as the man who once promised certainty, but as someone shaped by loss, and that realization both hurt and grounded him. When she finally spoke, she said she had returned to the city for work, that she hadn't planned to see him, that she had fought the urge to knock on his door, but something kept pulling her back, and Ethan listened without interrupting, because for once, he did not want to rush understanding, and as she talked, he remembered the night she left, the note she never wrote, the call that never came, the way he had waited for an explanation that time never delivered, and he realized that this moment, however sudden, was a chance to face the truth instead of imagining it. Claire paused, her voice steady but her eyes tired, and said she knew she had hurt him, that she knew disappearing was wrong, but at the time she believed leaving was the only way to survive the weight of expectations, and Ethan felt anger rise but settle just as quickly, replaced by something quieter, something like clarity, because hearing her speak made the past feel less like a wound and more like a scar, still there, but no longer bleeding. Outside, the rain slowed, and the city lights softened, and inside the apartment, two people who once shared a future now sat carefully in the present, unsure of the rules, unsure of the ending, but fully aware that this night mattered. Ethan did not forgive her, not yet, and Claire did not ask for it, and that honesty, small as it was, shifted the air between them, making it possible to breathe again. And when Claire finally said she should go, standing up slowly as if hoping he would stop her but respecting the silence he needed, Ethan walked her to the door, every step heavy with thought, and as she reached for the handle, she turned back, meeting his eyes, and in that look was a question she did not speak, one about chances, about timing, about whether some stories are meant to be rewritten, and Ethan did not answer, not with words, but he held the door open just a moment longer, enough to say that the story was not finished, only paused. And as Claire stepped back into the rain, disappearing down the hallway, Ethan closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing, mind alive in a way it had not been for years, knowing that whatever came next, this night had already changed something deep inside him, because the past had returned, not to haunt him, but to ask if he was ready to face it. Morning light entered Ethan's apartment in thin lines, touching the places where Claire had sat the night before, and even though she was gone, her presence stayed heavy in the air, following him as he made coffee, as he stared at his phone, as he tried to convince himself that the knock on the door had not reopened something fragile inside him. Yet by noon he found himself walking through the city without direction, memories moving faster than his steps, remembering how easily silence had once replaced love, and when his phone finally buzzed with a message from Claire asking if they could talk again, just to clear things properly, his first instinct was to ignore it, but honesty pulled harder than pride, and he agreed to meet her at a small cafe near the river, a place neutral enough to keep emotions from overflowing. When she arrived, she looked calmer than the night before, as if sleep had given her courage, and they sat across from each other with coffee between them, a simple setting for a complicated truth, and Claire began speaking without hesitation, explaining how her life had moved quickly after she left, how the job in Toronto had promised stability but demanded all of her attention, how she had told herself that distance would dull the pain of leaving Ethan behind, only to realize years later that avoiding pain does not erase it, it only hides it, and Ethan listened closely, noticing how her voice did not shake, how she owned her choices instead of excusing them, which made it harder to stay guarded. She spoke of nights when she almost called him, of birthdays she remembered but never reached out for, of the growing weight of knowing she had left without giving him a reason, and when she finally said she was sorry, not softly but firmly, as if she needed him to know she meant it, something shifted inside Ethan, because for so long he had imagined this moment filled with anger, yet what he felt now was clarity, a calm understanding that did not fix the past but explained it. He told her how her disappearance had changed him, how trust became difficult, how love turned cautious, how he learned to expect less so disappointment would hurt less, and Claire did not interrupt, did not defend herself. She only listened, her eyes steady, accepting the weight of what she had done, and that quiet respect mattered more than any apology. The cafe filled with soft noise around them, cups clinking, people talking, life moving forward, and Ethan realized that while the world had not paused for his heartbreak, it had shaped him into someone stronger, someone able to face this conversation without falling apart. And when Claire admitted she had not come back expecting forgiveness or a second chance, only truth, Ethan believed her, because there was no urgency in her words, no pressure in her presence, just honesty. They talked about who they had become, about small habits that changed, about dreams that shifted, about how time had altered their views on love and fear, and the more they spoke, the clearer it became that they were not the same people who once promised forever, but they were not strangers either. They were something in between, standing at a distance that could either remain or slowly close. When silence returned, it was lighter than before, and Ethan noticed that the anger he had carried for years had loosened its grip, replaced by something quieter, something thoughtful, and Claire sensed it too, because she smiled gently, not hopeful, not sad, just present, and said she would respect whatever distance he needed, that she would not disappear again without a word. And those last words stayed with him as they stood to leave, walking together toward the door before parting ways. No dramatic gestures, no promises made, just a shared understanding that the truth had finally been spoken. Outside, the river moved steadily, reflecting the sky, and as Claire walked away, Ethan did not feel the sharp ache he once feared. Instead he felt grounded, aware that closure did not always mean goodbye, sometimes it simply meant seeing clearly, and as he watched her fade into the crowd, he realized that whatever happened next would not be driven by unanswered questions anymore, because for the first time in years, the past had spoken honestly, and he had listened. The days after the cafe meeting moved faster than Ethan expected, yet each hour felt heavy, as if his mind was running while his heart walked slowly behind, and even though Claire had not contacted him again, her honesty stayed with him, following him to work, into the grocery store, through late evenings when the city grew quiet and his thoughts grew loud, and he realized that what unsettled him most was not her return, but the space it created inside him, a space where old feelings stirred without permission. He tried to distract himself with routine, waking early, answering emails, meeting deadlines, telling himself that life had already settled into a shape he understood, yet small moments kept breaking through, a song on the radio, a familiar laugh from across the street, the smell of coffee that reminded him of mornings he once shared, and each time, instead of pushing the memory away. He let it pass, noticing how it no longer cut as deeply as it once had. One evening, unable to sit still, Ethan walked along the river, watching the water move with steady purpose, thinking about how time had carried both him and Claire forward whether they were ready or not, and he wondered if holding on to distance was truly protection or just habit, because for years he had told himself that being careful meant being safe, yet now safety felt quiet but empty. Across town, Claire lived inside her own thoughts, unpacking her suitcase in a small hotel room, folding clothes she might not need, staring at the city lights through the window, replaying every word spoken at the cafe, relieved she had finally told the truth, yet unsure what it had cost her, and she reminded herself that returning did not mean reclaiming the past, it meant accepting whatever outcome followed honesty. She spent her days walking unfamiliar streets, attending meetings that felt distant, checking her phone without expectation, because for the first time she was not running from her choices, she was standing inside them, and that brought both peace and uncertainty. Ethan and Claire did not speak for several days, and that silence was different from the one that once separated them, because this time it was chosen, respectful, giving room for reflection instead of confusion, and during that quiet, Ethan noticed how his anger had softened into something thoughtful, something that asked questions instead of placing blame, and he began to understand that healing was not about forgetting what hurt him, but about deciding what still mattered. One night, as rain returned lightly to the city, Ethan sat by his window again, much like the night Claire knocked on his door, but this time the loneliness felt different, less sharp, more honest, and he admitted to himself that part of him was curious, not about reliving the past, but about exploring who they could be now, without illusions, without fear guiding every choice. He opened his phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed again, realizing that reaching out was not a sign of weakness, but of clarity, yet he stopped, deciding that if there was another conversation, it should come from certainty, not restlessness. The next morning, he focused on himself, meeting a friend for lunch, laughing easily, noticing how life still held warmth beyond one person, and that realization grounded him, reminding him that any future choice should add to his life, not rescue it. Claire, meanwhile, received confirmation that her work assignment would allow her to stay in the city longer, and the decision settled heavily. Because staying meant facing the possibility of unfinished feelings, yet leaving again without clarity felt wrong, and she understood now that courage was not found in escape, but in patience. As the week moved forward, Ethan began sleeping better, his thoughts more organized, his emotions less tangled, and he accepted that whatever connection remained between him and Claire did not demand immediate answers. Some stories needed time to reveal their meaning. Then one evening, as he walked home from work, his phone buzzed with a message from Claire, simple and careful, asking if he would like to talk again, not to decide anything, not to reopen wounds, but to sit with honesty one more time. And Ethan stopped on the sidewalk, the city moving around him, feeling a quiet calm instead of panic, and he realized that this moment was not about returning to the past, it was about choosing how to move forward. He replied yes, not because he was certain of the outcome, but because he trusted himself now, trusted that he could listen without losing himself, trusted that whatever came next would be shaped by intention, not fear. And as he put his phone away and continued walking, the river nearby reflecting the fading light, Ethan felt something settle into place, a steady readiness, knowing that the space between hearts is not always a distance to fear, sometimes it is simply room to grow before meeting again with open eyes. The evening felt calm but important as Ethan arrived at the small cafe near the river, the same place where honesty had first replaced silence, and when Claire walked in moments later, there was no tension in her steps, only purpose, and they greeted each other with a quiet warmth that showed how much had changed in such a short time. They sat by the window, city lights beginning to glow outside, and Ethan noticed how steady he felt, how his thoughts were clear instead of racing, and Claire sensed it too, because she spoke gently but directly, saying she was grateful he agreed to meet again, not to rewrite the past, but to understand what the present allowed, and Ethan appreciated that clarity, because it removed pressure and left room for truth. He told her that the space between them had helped him see himself more clearly, helped him understand that he no longer wanted to live guarded by old hurt, but guided by self-respect. And Claire listened with the same calm she had shown before, nodding, accepting that growth does not always mean reunion, and when she shared that she had decided to stay in the city longer, not because she expected anything from him, but because she finally felt aligned with her own choices, Ethan respected that honesty, knowing how hard it was to stay present without promises. The conversation flowed easily, touching on hopes, lessons, and quiet fears, not dramatic, not heavy, just real, and as they spoke, Ethan realized that what mattered most was not whether love returned the same way, but whether it could exist in a healthier form, without running, without silence, without fear deciding the ending. The cafe slowly emptied, and outside the rain began again, light and steady, and when they stood to leave, neither rushed, neither hesitated, and they walked together along the river, the sound of water filling the spaces where words were no longer needed, and Claire finally said that whatever happened next, she was thankful they had met again honestly, because it allowed her to let go of regret, and Ethan felt the same, because forgiveness had quietly taken root inside him, not dramatic, not loud, but freeing. He told her that he did not know what the future held, but he knew he was no longer afraid of facing it, and Claire smiled, not with expectation, but with understanding, and in that moment Ethan stared in disbelief again, not because of surprise, but because of how calm his heart felt, how complete the moment was without needing more. They stopped near the bridge, city lights reflecting on the water like small promises, and Ethan realized that change does not always arrive as a grand decision. Sometimes it arrives as peace, as the ability to stand beside someone without losing yourself, and when Claire asked if they could take things slowly, without labels or urgency, Ethan agreed, knowing that slow did not mean unsure, it meant intentional. They parted that night with a simple embrace, respectful and warm, and as Ethan walked home alone, he felt lighter than he had in years, not because everything was resolved, but because he trusted himself again, trusted his choices, trusted that whatever path unfolded would be walked with honesty. Days later, life continued normally, work, routines, quiet mornings, but now there was space for connection, small messages, shared walks, conversations that built instead of reopened wounds, and Ethan noticed how love felt different this time, calmer, grounded, no longer driven by fear of loss. Claire felt it too, because staying present no longer felt heavy, it felt right, and as time moved forward, they allowed their bond to grow naturally. Without pressure, without rushing to define it, understanding that some stories do not need dramatic endings or beginnings, they only need truth and patience, and whenever Ethan thought back to the night Claire stood at his door, the night he stared in disbelief, he smiled quietly, knowing that moment did not return the past, it changed the future, not by force, but by choice, by two people finally meeting each other as they truly were, ready to move forward with open eyes and steady hearts.